I had the most amazing time at the Culinary Institute of America. I actually attended 2 boot camps there and loved everything I learned. You know, the whole time I was there, I was thinking 2 things. I was thinking, what am I learning here in a professional kitchen that are must-dos in a home kitchen? Because I'm obviously a home cook, I've never been professionally trained. The second thing I was thinking about is what equipment is so helpful that we don't know about in a home kitchen that would really be useful if we incorporate it. I want to show you a few things that I've brought home from the Culinary Institute that I feel like really could up the game of any home cook to make their cooking better, more efficient, all those things. So the first thing I want to show you is what I'm wearing. So this is a typical chef's apron. You can see what it looks like. It folds over, it ties here at the center, and then right here on the side, I have tucked in a kitchen towel. So that's something that we did at the Institute, and I absolutely loved it because kitchen towel is right here at hand at all times. We use that towel as a hot pad. Like, they didn't have hot pads. You would just use it as the thing you would use to take something out of the oven or whatever that was hot. We also used it to dry off a dish that we were washing real quick. We used it to wipe our hands on after we washed them. We just used it for so many things, and I usually have it sitting right over there on the counter, but I find that it's even more convenient when it's just tucked in here. Yesterday, I didn't have an apron on like this. So what did I do? I literally just tucked it into the waistband of the shorts that I was wearing because it's become just something that I really don't want to cook without. So that's something that I definitely picked up, is it's really nice to have an apron, and it's really nice to have a little towel tucked in right here around your waist. The other things I picked up as far as tips and tricks and also equipment. So this right here, underneath here, is a teak butcher block. At the Culinary Institute, we all had a butcher block that we would cut everything on. I loved it because it was large enough to do multiple things on, but I also loved it because it's really soft and kind to knives. So I came home and I got myself a teak butcher block. Mine is actually a little thinner than the one they had there because my countertops are a little taller. I noticed while we were there that their countertops were quite low. So if I use a thick butcher block on top of a higher countertop, I was afraid my arms would be lifted up too much. So this is probably about, oh, you can see how thick it is. It's this piece of wood here. It's probably about 1 inch thick. And then on top of this, what is this that I have on top? This is a second cutting board that I bought that's sized the exact same size as the underneath one, and this is for meat. So when you're cutting any kind of meat, what you do is you just put this one right on top of the other one. You cut meat here, and then it just goes right to the sink. You disinfect it, clean it right away, disinfect the board that it's sitting on, your cutting board, but you don't have to worry about any of that meat product getting down into the board that you're using all the time. So I really loved that. One other thing that I picked up, oh, I don't have it still over here, is that we used a boning knife when we were cleaning up meat. I just had a pork leg roast that I'm actually putting into a pot here. I'm using this to make some really yummy pork green chili mole. I'm excited about that today. But as I was cleaning up that pork roast, I did such a better job than I've ever done before. First of all, because I used a boning knife, and this wasn't very expensive. All of these things I got on Amazon. But a boning knife is really flexible. So what it does is it's able to get underneath kind of the hard tissues on the meat. So you can see what I have left over here for trimmings. It was actually quite a bit of trimmings. I trimmed off the thick fat pad that it was across the top. And then there was what's called silver skin, which anatomically, it's the lining between the muscles and the fat a lot of times. It's really tough. You don't like to chew it. So I just slid that boning knife underneath that and slid along the silver skin and was able to remove it quite easily and quickly. I cleaned all that up, like I said, better than I probably have ever done because I knew to do it and knew how to do it this time around. So after that, I chunked it up just into nice little chunks, and in the pot it goes. The other thing that I learned that I love is something called mise en place. And what is that? That literally means everything in its place. Now that I'm getting started here, what I did is I went over and I prepped all of my veggies. So these are all my veggies straight out of my garden, but you can see everything's washed, everything's cleaned up, everything's, the onions are cleaned up to the point that I'm ready to use them. Everything's ready to go. I also had, in this recipe, a few other things that aren't there. So I've been heating up my chicken stock. It's right down here in my steam oven right now. We'll see if it's defrosted. Oh, it's definitely defrosted. So I freeze chicken stock. So I've been defrosting my chicken stock in there, so it's all ready to go. I have all the spices ready to go, and everything's just chopped and ready before you really start cooking. Now, that's not the case with this, because this is a slower cook. This is gonna have to go in this pot for an hour, as well as I have some dried beans over here, and they're gonna have to go in the pot for an hour. So those are gonna go on first. They're gonna go on, they're gonna cook on the stove. And then I'm gonna get everything ready here next. I'm going to get all the onions chopped. I'm making some pickled onions today. I'm gonna get all the onions chopped ahead of time. I'm gonna get all the peppers, the tomatoes blanched. I'm making some Spanish rice. I'm just gonna do all the things in place first before I really get going on anything. What that does is it enables you to really do 2 or 3 kind of dishes at the same time, because you just throw this in, throw this in, throw this in. So that's something I definitely learned as well. The other thing I learned, which I didn't expect to learn, is that temperatures that recipes call for on the oven and on the stove, the oven I always follow. I figure they know what they're talking about when they tell us what the temperature to bake something at or roast something at. But on the stove, I don't pay attention to recipes at all. It says cook in a medium-sized pot at medium to high temperature. And I usually just throw it on and turn the stove on. Well, what I learned is that the higher temperatures cook the outside of the food first. So you'll get browning or caramelization, but they don't necessarily cook the inside. So if you want to cook something on the stove and you want it to be cooked all the way through, you're going to want to put it on a medium temperature. You don't want it to burn. If you're adding something like garlic that burns quite quickly or butter that burns quite quickly, you're never going to want to increase it higher than about medium temperature. So that was really interesting. The other thing I learned was the size of a pan matters. So when you're reading a recipe, look at the size of the pan. So our instructor had kind of a rule of thumb that he used, and he said that the things in the pan should cover about 75% of the pan. The reason is, if you have a great big pan and just a little bit of food, there's going to be a lot of hot spots in that pan and it's going to cook inconsistently. Or if you have a little pan and it's totally crammed with food, it's going to steam the food rather than really cook the food. So these are just all things that I learned while actually following the recipes for a change. Our instructor, one of the things he really reinforces, we would say, well, what temperature should we cook that at? And he would say, what do you think? What are you trying to achieve? And so that really helped me as well. What am I trying to achieve? Okay, I'm trying to brown these onions. Okay, I need a little higher temperature. Oh, I'm going to steam these onions or sweat these onions. I need a lower temperature. So it all just depends on what you're trying to do. These are some of the tips and tricks I learned. I'm sure there'll be others that come out as we go along, but those are some of the biggies that I've been bringing back home to my home.